Navigating Betrayal webinar, podcast, and YouTube channel. I'm your host, KayLee Dunn, betrayal navigation coach, betrayal trauma therapist of over a decade, and admin of this free group, Humans Navigating Betrayal, here on Facebook. Today, we're going to be talking to two incredible humans, Nicole and Hunter Otis. And Nicole is a marriage and family therapist. She's a CSAT, so she's a certified sexual addiction therapist, and she's been studying this for a while. I'll let her introduce herself more. Hunter is a men's coach, a men's healing coach, and he helps men quit pornography for the last time, finally. But he'll talk more about that in a minute. But today we are going to cover this big question. We won't be able to cover it all in 1 hour, but we're going to do our best. What to look for when your partner is recovering from problematic pornography use. That's what we're going to be covering. So I'm going to have Nicole and Hunter introduce themselves, but stick around to the end for question and answer. So if you're here live in the Facebook group, we're going to have a period at the end. I'll check over. And if you guys have questions, you can type them in live in the Facebook group. We will answer those, as many as we can in the time provided. If you're not on the Facebook group and you're listening to this later, either on YouTube or on the podcast, come join us. You can mute the group, but then you'll just know when all the webinars are if you don't necessarily want to participate in a group quite yet. But join us. So Nicole and Hunter, why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourselves, let us know who you are and what is your background, history, and what brought you to this conversation today.
Yeah, thank you, KayLee. I'm Nicole Otis, like she said. Thank you for having us, and hello to everyone out there. So I've been a marriage and family therapist since 2009, and then we've been married 12 years, I think it is now.
Something like that.
Yeah. We have 3 beautiful girls, ages 7, 9, and 10, and they keep us busy. And I also homeschool them and have a part-time practice as well. I am a betrayed partner as well, and that's actually what got me into studying to be a CSAT. And we can get into our story a little bit more, but we love helping couples. We've been through it in our marriage, and that's why we're here. So if you want to share a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I personally struggled immensely with pornography. And for me, it was a huge struggle with learning how to be honest as well, which it's one thing to struggle with pornography. It's another thing to lie about it over and over and over again, which many of you viewing understand. It's really devastating on a relationship. And so we went through the thick of that. I had a lot to learn and a lot to struggle through, and it really impacted our relationship. But I like to say, by the grace of God and through a wife that was willing to become certified and learn and use her profession as an opportunity to further our skills to be able to make it through, we did. And really at this point now in our relationship, we're deepening our personal intimacy as a couple and taking that to the next level. It's just been an incredible year for that. So we're super happy to be here now. Starting in like 2017, we were helping men and women and couples. Now I'm helping men. Nicole works in her part-time practice with some couples. And then we like to point people towards KayLee that are struggling with betrayal. And so at this point, I work hands-on with a lot of men, and it's just been an incredible journey to be able to share. Just, you guys know, it's a roller coaster, to be able to share that personal life experience with them and help them rise up and be men is really fulfilling.
Absolutely. Well, I'm so honored to have both of you here, with your personal experience of experiencing betrayal in the relationship, having the betrayal trauma go on in your life, which we don't wish on our worst enemy. Having the pornography just be that monkey on your back that you could not shake despite so much. And I've heard quite a bit of your story now as we've, connected, Hunter, and how hard you worked and just continued to find yourself struggling and slipping and failing and continuing to move forward. I see a lot of, resilience that you've chosen to continue to do that, both of you. And then that you have that expertise as well, that you can bring that to the group. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people with a lot of questions for you, Hunter, because we don't always get betraying partners, as we call it, right? You're still a human being. We're not going to slap a label because everybody has a different label for what brings them to problematic pornography use. But But I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions here today. So if you're, I can see that you guys are in here. So if you want to say where you're hailing from, you're welcome to start commenting a little bit, or if you have questions, you can start asking. But I'm trying to think if I want to ask you anything else about you guys before we move into the topic at hand. Maybe tell us a little bit about this most recent resurgence of success that you guys have had, ongoing success that sounds like, sticky success that's ongoing, and really, I can tell like it's building you together. And as someone who is, I don't know if you can say on the other side of this, because it'll always be a part of you, it's always a part of your life story. But as someone who's also in that deepening, strengthening relationship phase, I'm excited for you. And I'm wondering, what has kind of been that little oomph that changed the tracks for you, Hunter and Nicole?
Yeah. Do you want to go first?
Oh, well, it's kind of hard to put like that many years of recovery into like just a few sentences, because we have been through the ringer. Like, we have gone through so much. And so it's not, I think, just one thing, because we have, I got certified as a sex addiction therapist. I have read so many books, listened to so many podcasts. I have been through multiple therapists myself, betrayal trauma group. And when I was going through some stuff, I actually worked with KayLee, who was amazing. And I learned so much from her. And then I think most recently, I think, what has helped us in our relationship is us both working on our stuff individually. So knowing that, I think him taking accountability for his life, and me taking accountability for my life. And I think that's, there's so much more than that, because it's really, like I said, it's really just hard to kind of boil down just to a few things. But as of lately, we've really kind of, because we're kind of over the hump of, he doesn't have a problem with lying anymore and consistently pornography use, so the trust is back. And not that, we always are working on things and everything there, but I think that we're now in a place, because the trust is back, we're able to work on healthy sexuality and integrating that. And that's both of our work, because we both have been wounded. And not even wounded from the pornography use there, but wounded from the world and from our culture that teaches us about sexuality.
Like how you got to that point.
So there's just so much.
And
there's just so much shame around sexuality for men and women. And we have really been working on that for ourselves. And so that has been such a blessing for us. We've gone through marriage intensives and healthy sexuality intensives. And so, it is a really beautiful thing to be on that other side, that we can work towards that. And we know that a lot of people are not there. But that's where we are at. But like I said, I don't know what you want to say, but it's really kind of hard to boil it down to just one thing. It's just God and so many pieces, so many helpers, so many people that have helped us along in our journey. And so I can't really just boil it down to a couple of things.
Well, I think that something significant, which she did bring up, was just all the years of work. I think the thing for me is, even if I was still screwing up or still struggling with honesty, it's like I still just kept getting back up no matter what. No matter what depth of despair I felt like I was in, or however powerless I felt, I just had this thing in me that was like, what else am I going to do? Like, am I going to, I need to keep getting back up. So there was that, even when things were bad, it's like, I just wouldn't give up. So like, that's a huge thing, is that you want to see that in your men, which we'll talk about, that they just don't quit trying until they figure it out. So there's that. But then I think we kind of got to this point where, as a result of going through all that and doing that work, the energy just started to shift. And we're going to talk more about this here, I'm sure, on the podcast, or in our live as well. But I just think that both of us, we could feel that something was happening. We could feel that something was shifting. And I started shifting a lot, and she started shifting a lot. So I think just as a result of doing all that work for years and years and years, we just started coming together more. And it was not easy. It feels like it kind of just happened naturally, but it was not easy, because what has to happen for us to now integrate together as a relationship is we have to really let go of a lot of that old stuff or our own ego and see now that this problem is under control, we have to actually look at what each of us individually are doing that's not helpful for the relationship.
Right.
So it's coming out of any kind of victim narrative on my side and also on her side, and choosing to take courage and risk fully coming together now. But I feel like there was an energetic shift that happened for us in this last year that really has allowed us to start to come together in a way we never were able to before, and do like marriage intensives and stuff, which we just weren't able to do before because we weren't in that place. You know?
Right. Yeah.
Well, that's so powerful. And Nicole, I like how you pointed out that many of the people who are maybe here tonight haven't had that energetic shift yet, or may not, end up having that. And so we are going to speak mostly to what's happening in that messy middle space where, so we're thinking back from our own experiences back into that space, which you both know very well. And we're going to speak to most of that tonight. But I hope with some of this discussion the two of you have had just for a little bit, that we're kind of projecting a little bit of vision for those who are thinking like, gosh, I really want this relationship to work. And I think there's a chance maybe, and maybe if the relationship, doesn't, what can I look for that's going to give me some clues that we're on the right track or we're not on the right track. But if you can kind of hear some of that, there's an energetic shift, there's an honesty, there's a sobriety, there's a shift in the way that we're thinking, that can project a vision for so many of us who are just like, I don't even know. Right? You guys probably remember that, where you're just standing there like reading a book and listening to a podcast and talking to a therapist and just going like, what's the next step? I have no idea. And so I really like to bring on people who are kind of down the road a little bit and can give just share a little bit of vision. But let's kind of rewind, right? Let's rewind and let's start at just, this question that we're talking about, which is what to look for. So most of our viewers tonight are betrayed partners. They've experienced betrayal. And most of them have, a part of that has been some form of problematic pornography use. And that, as we know, ranges the gamut from addiction to habit to whatever you want to call it. It can be a part of a narcissistic habit. It can be part of an integrity abuse problem, usually a combination of factors, right? It can be a part of a neurodivergence. A whole bunch of things can be affecting that pornography use problem. But what to look for when that person is saying, hey, I want to get better. Don't leave me. Let's stay together. Let's make this relationship work. What are we going to be looking for? But first, I just want to know, and this might be putting you on the spot a little bit, so I'm not looking for anything, dictionary definition, but how do you guys define, problematic pornography use? Like when you guys are saying, Hunter, especially, you have guys coming to you all the time, and you have since 2016 and beyond, 17 and beyond, when you have people coming to you saying, I have this problem, how do you go about defining that? Because I think a lot of people also who are listening, their partners are like, this isn't a problem. And they're like, but is it a problem? So if we can help kind of create a picture for what that means, that can be helpful.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts? Do you want me to dive in?
Well, sure. There was a couple things you said, like what to look for if they're moving towards recovery. And then also like the pornography piece, like when is it problematic?
Yeah, so
do you want to hit that first, and then I can answer the other, or we can both answer the other questions of like, how did we know when it was started to shift, or how do you know when someone's moving into recovery?
Like, is there a chance here? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's kind of like the classic answers of, okay, have you tried quitting multiple times and have been unsuccessful? Right.
Right.
I ask guys too, like, does it feel automatic? Like, do you feel like you're watching a bad dream? A bad movie, like part of you doesn't want to do this, but you're kind of going on this autopilot.
Yeah.
That's a big indicator. I also ask guys a lot, like, what type of an impact do you feel like this is having on your life? And they're usually very forthcoming and just saying, I feel terrible after I view it, but when I'm caught up in it, I just can't stop myself.
Yeah.
Also, there's an escalation effect that happens. Just the simple fact of how our brains work. When you view pornography, it desensitizes your dopamine receptors in your brain, and you need more or riskier or more taboo types of behaviors sometimes. That doesn't happen for everyone.
Yeah.
Right.
To be clear,
No, it
have
doesn't.
guys that viewed the same type of pornography and the same amount for years on end. Like maybe it escalated a little bit in that they viewed it a little bit more, like 1 or 2 more times per week when it was at its worst. So I don't want to freak anybody out and say it absolutely will escalate to, taboo or, violent type of pornography, but it can.
It can, but it doesn't always.
And it doesn't mean that that person's a bad person. It's just, this is how the brain works.
Right.
The more desensitized it gets, because it's being used as a primary coping tool, you need more and more of the drug to get the same effect. It's the same. It's just like with a chemical drug. So that's something I look for, but I look for the emotional impact it's having. And also, what are the real world consequences? Is it damaging their relationship? And, whether they actually have a full blown addiction or not, if it's damaging the relationship, then it's problematic.
Yep.
Right.
Then it's something that they're not wanting in their life, or part of them does and part of them doesn't. Right. And how do I help them reconcile that? So, there's other avenues, but I try to get really personal with the guy and just say, if you were to fast forward a year or two from now, like, what does your ideal life look like? And is pornography helping you get there or not?
Right.
Plain and simple. Not, are you an addict? Are you not? It's none of that. Does it have a place in your ideal future? Yes or no?
Right.
Let's look at it objectively. And if it's a no, then we got to do whatever we got to do to help change it.
Right. Yep.
Absolutely.
And if there isn't an addiction and someone is using pornography, like, what's the context and the intention of why they're using it? Are they using it like a drug to escape life, escape their emotions, not deal with the conflict or the marital issues or the emotions, right? The vulnerability, right? And so, so there may not be using it, every single day or something like that. But if they are continually running from their life and not dealing with their emotions and life and the stressors, it's problematic. So like you said, it's not building the life that you want. It's not building the intimacy and the relationship and also like affecting your work life. Like, I think if you looked at pornography 30 minutes every day and you added that up over your life, what was the amount? Like, it was like
if you during your working years, if you viewed pornography for just 30 minutes a day, that's basically from like age 20 to 65, say your working years. That's like almost an entire year's worth of time.
Right.
Like,
and how much money is that squandered, right?
Yes, how much money and time
investment that is lost because
it's
your time
like,
is usually, existential. So
yes,
right.
Like, it's almost 9,000 hours.
Yeah.
And like, people say it takes 10,000 hours to become a total master at something. It's like, so this is a big deal, right? Like, you could totally create something truly incredible in your life with that simply 30 minutes a day being spent towards something meaningful, right?
Spending time with your kids, spending time with your spouse, learning a new skill, all these things that the pornography is not going to get you.
And that's one of the biggest, one of many reasons why it can feel so painful when a partner finds out about pornography, even if they don't always have a moralistic reason for it, which is a painful reason. But sometimes it just is that like transference of time and energy. It's just like, well, you're becoming a master at this, but because you're numbing out emotion, you're not actually capable, and usually in a very capable space, to be relational and empathetic and humble and honest and all those other things. And so it's that transfer of where are you investing your time and energy. So I like how really concrete and practical you're talking about this, because sometimes it feels like, oh, is it this big disorder? Is it this, and it can be for sure, it can have addiction, it can have narcissism involved, it can have a lot of things. But even saying, is it interrupting the relationship? Then it's problematic. There's this therapist I really like. His name's Bill Herring. I don't know if you guys know him, but he has this outline where he talks about problematic pornography use. And he says he has 5 categories and it only has to fit into one to be considered problematic sexual behavior, basically. And one of them is commitment violations, value conflicts. So if their own values conflict with what they're doing, which often happens with that escalation, if that's going on, diminished control that you described, negative consequences, which includes that relationship, and lack of responsibility. And I think that simplifying it down can be really helpful, especially for a betraying partner who's like, well, do they have an addiction? Is it okay? Is it not okay? You know, just ask yourself, is this getting in the way of our connection? Is this getting in the way of our
Right.
relationship?
Yes.
Is this going against their values or their commitments to you? Or they keep saying, oh, I'm going to quit, and then they don't. Well, then it's a problem, right?
Right.
Yes.
And it's
Mhm.
okay for you to say, look, you said you were going to stop and you're not. That's a commitment violation, right? And so I need to take this seriously. And I don't have to feel like I'm the problem, I'm overreacting, I'm insecure if you're the betrayed partner, because it's a problem.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like what you're saying. Like, keep it simple. You
Mhm.
don't need it. It doesn't need to necessarily have a textbook definition on it, right?
For you to
It's
say
just
this isn't
about
working.
real world impact. Like, just look at simply how is it impacting you? How's it impacting them?
Mhm.
And again, is this something we want as part of our future?
Right.
Yes or no?
Right.
And I think that
Well,
real
and-
world impact will go. Oh, go ahead, Nicole.
Oh, I was just going to quick say, when early on in our recovery, Hunter went to a therapist, and the therapist said, it sounds like functional pornography use. Why do you have a problem with it? Just keep using it.
Yeah.
But it went against
Oh,
his
man.
values. It went against what he knew that it was a problem for him.
him.
And he knew
Yep.
that he was lying about it and keeping it a secret and
Yes.
not telling me. But but because it didn't have the textbook definition of an addiction, and it wasn't impacting like his work life or responsibility.
Right. It wasn't this
That-
extreme.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
understand that, you know, there's different therapists who have different views. And, but for him, that didn't work because
Yep.
he didn't feel like he was being heard, and
Yes.
he didn't get the help that he needed, you know? And so that's why we kept going on a search for someone who could help us, who
Mhm.
could
Yeah.
help him. And so,
Well, that's what was so painful about that situation. This was before she even knew.
Yeah.
And I was devastated that I was struggling with this, and I didn't know how to tell her. I told her once before, thinking I'd be fine after that. And then it went underground because I was so embarrassed and ashamed. And in desperation, I went to this doctor that I thought was, going to be able to help
Yep.
me. Just like, been around the block a few times, right? Very well
Yeah.
educated. And he basically told me not to reschedule because I was saying that I thought it was a serious issue. I was
Yeah.
just devastated. Like,
Well, because
that's
you're
how the
all
beginning of
alone.
that's how the beginning of my recovery journey started.
Yeah.
I was being told I didn't have a problem, even though I was absolutely miserable, Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so bringing it back to these like real world, how is this affecting you? Is it causing issues in your life, whether you're the betrayed partner or the one who's being, having the struggle? Are you, is it working? And if it's not working, it's a problem. And if it's a problem,
Right.
there's
Yes.
support. And then like you did, which maybe it took time, I don't know how that worked out for you, but when you run into people who tell you, whether it's your friend or your sister or your cousin or your dad or your mother-in-law, that's like, oh, guys, blah, 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 or, oh, it's not a big deal, get over it,
Yep.
ignore it. You don't. You say this isn't working, and you keep
Yes.
seeking that support.
yep.
Yes.
So let's get into that. And Nicole, you were kind of going to talk to like, and this really does tie into this real world, what's happening in real life for you. How do you know how to look for things? Maybe you have a partner who's started therapy, or maybe the person who has this problematic pornography use has started therapy, or maybe they say they're quitting. They're like, oh, I'm quitting. Maybe they're claiming that they're good now, or you are seeing actions that they're doing. So what are those things in real life that you can look for that knows that, there's safety cues that there's progress being made or not?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I think a big one is taking accountability. I think that's a huge one. And I think that's when I really started seeing that shift for Hunter,
Yeah.
is that he took accountability for this issue and was seeking out the help and getting the help. And now, and the honesty piece. So being honest, whether it was painful for him or me.
Yeah.
And so you're starting, but that was any of this work like takes time. It's not about
It's not like overnight. Yeah.
right. It's not going to be an
Right.
overnight switch. It might be maybe for some of the characteristics, but most of the time it's going to be a process.
Yeah.
So I always say it's like not perfection, but it's a process and progresses over time.
Yeah.
But that you start to see that the minimization over their behavior,
Mhm.
they don't minimize things. They start to be fully honest about things. They start to do the work for themselves.
Right.
Now,
Yep.
I think like a lot of times people come in because they're busted or they're caught and
Yeah.
so they have this fire underneath them because from their partner to say go get the help. And I don't necessarily think that that's wrong, because they, you know, and oftentimes the addict will have relief that yes, it's like out there now, like I've been
Right.
holding on to this for so long. But oftentimes the motivation is the relationship or their partner pushing them. And I don't think that that's
Mhm.
necessarily wrong, but somewhere along the line, they start doing it for themselves.
Yep.
Right.
It's like
And
that
not-
first order change becomes a second order change, right?
Right. And if you don't see that switch, what I've noticed the problem, you've probably seen this too, is that then it becomes this extra labor the betrayed partner is either trying to do in addition to their
Yes.
own recovery work. So it gets kind of in the way of the betrayed partner's
Yes.
recovery work, because now they're like, well, if I don't get on top of them, they're not going to read their books, or they're not going to go to therapy, or they're going to take this seriously.
Yes.
So that becomes a problem, because that's not your responsibility. But I actually really like how you said that, Nicole, because sometimes you get this feeling that, oh, if he goes in just for you, that's a bad way to start. But I think that that's not necessarily a bad way to start. I think it's a common way to start. And as long as that heart shift changes, where they're like, they get some vision and they get some mission, and they're like, hey, you know what? I think that's what Hunter does really, really well at is really lighting that fire in them, that like, wait a minute, I could have a better life. Wait a minute, I don't feel like crap all the time. It really,
Yes.
when that shift can occur and they kind of get into this, for lack of a better term, a really positive masculine energy over their recovery.
Yes.
I think that's that energy shift. For me, it was like the sense of my husband was like way more attuned. So I'll give you an example. Like in the early years, I would have nightmares, you know, I would have these betrayal trauma nightmares, and he would feel bad, but he would just be like, oh, I'm sorry. Good night. You know, and he was he was loving and he felt bad, but he's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. So I'm just going to be like, good night. Yep. And whereas like, I don't know, not too long ago, I had a nightmare and like, you know, woke up and talked to him about it in the morning, and he like held my face, and he had misty, and he was like, I'm so sorry. You have to have dreams like this, you know, and it was so attuned. And that's a massive shift over the course of many years.
Yes.
But even in the small moments, I noticed just an emotional attunement that was genuine, which felt different than kind of like, I'll say whatever I need to say to get you to stop feeling something because I can't tolerate your emotions. So there's a lot of different things to look for. But I think honesty is a really good indicator that you described. Connectedness is another good indicator.
I do think I just want to put a highlight on what you said about that they start to manage their own emotions and not try to control yours. And they let you have your emotions. Sometimes we're going to be we're just going to be all over the place, right?
We need to be.
It's just a roller coaster, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, and they come to more of an acceptance. They can handle themselves a lot better when you're not in that healthy space, or you're just in not a good spot, or you're just having your emotions or feelings, and they're just able to handle it more and have more empathy. But I think like I said, it's kind of almost like, but I also can do that for him. If he's
I was going to highlight that too. Yeah.
If he's in a bad space as well, with his emotions, or he's triggered, or he's having a rough day, or whatever it could be, that I'm able to be in a space where I can manage my own, I call it tornado brain. But I can manage my own tornado brain, and he can manage his own tornado brain.
Yeah.
But
if we
can
need
also
to pause, we can stop and we can regulate. And sometimes if I've got, 10 more points in my emotional regulation bucket, I can show up, especially if it's not related to betrayal, right? Then he's having a bad day at work, he's emotionally triggered. We can be that shoulder to lean on. And vice versa. Yeah. Which is such a fun stage to be in.
What I think something to kind of go along with that is seeing your partner no longer need to constantly be validated by you. Like I want my guys to be able to validate themselves, to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. Right. And that's what really allows this to happen where she can be upset and I'm still okay.
Right.
So many guys, they run away to pornography because they just truly can't handle. Well, they think that they can't handle your emotions, but it's really their own. It's their own emotional
Right.
reaction to your response.
Yep.
Right. So by them standing on their own 2 feet, they're more emotionally resilient and they can handle that. Or when they can't, they can speak up for themselves, advocate for themselves and say, you know what, I want to have this conversation, but I'm not in a good spot and I need a breather.
Yeah.
Can we resume? Like, can we hit pause and
Yeah.
resume in an hour or 30 minutes or whatever?
Yeah, that's been a big moment for a lot of the clients I've worked with over the years when I'm working with couples where the betrayer, the guy who struggles with porn or whatever's going on, he can start to learn like, I can have healthy boundaries and I can take a step away in a conversation. I can regulate myself. I can let her have emotions and that's okay. And then I can come back. And I can also, if she's in a space to empathize with me, I can share openly or with my recovery guys or with my coach or with my therapist. And I actually can share some of that stuff. And it's not all ooey gooey, mushy gushy, dance around, silly, right?
Right.
It's legitimate and it matters and I matter. And some of that is just really cool to watch those kind of transformations.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I even saw that this week with one of my clients, in their relationship, this has been the big pattern, this neediness, right? And then just this victim narrative, and that would lead him towards pornography so much. And, him standing on his own 2 feet means that sometimes his wife doesn't even like that very much too.
That's
right?
a new thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a new thing. And he's standing up for himself a little bit too, in a healthy way, not
Right.
in a narcissistic, tyrannical way. Right.
Right.
But he's actually speaking up instead of just boiling in resentment and holding on to it and then letting that anger come out sideways anyway. Right. He's actually speaking his truth.
Mm-hmm.
And but that's what should happen in a real relationship, right? So even though maybe his wife doesn't like what he's standing up for, right? Because maybe she has a different opinion, she actually does, because now there's real relationship stuff starting to happen. And because he's willing to be vulnerable with himself and stand up, there's more to be known there. Like, that's the bedrock of intimacy, is knowing and being known in the relationship. And before, like, he would just tell her what she wanted to hear.
If it's just the nice guy thing happening, or the people pleaser, whatever word you want to use.
Yes.
And you have that like shrinking puppy dog, shut down, be quiet, or just tell you what you want to hear, be charming to make it all okay. Whatever that way that manifests itself, none of it's honest. And at the end of the day, it's felt in the relationship, right? And so when pornography is removed and healthy coping mechanisms and vision and self-love or self-acceptance, maybe is a better word sometimes, is there. I totally agree. I think that there was a moment for me where I'm like, wait a minute, I don't get to just boss you around all the time. You get into that like negative, thing that can happen when there's that nice guy syndrome going on. And so, there is a moment you're like, oh, okay, I gotta actually have a relationship now. And that's new and hard for a minute, especially if there's been years of betrayal. So that's a new adjustment, but
you said that
over
there's
time,
honesty.
it improves because it's real.
Right. Well, and you said there's honesty in that, right? And that's something like, that's to bring up that's something that you want to see in your partner. You want to see that honesty. You want to see them being authentically themselves and actually sharing what they're really feeling instead of just giving you lip service.
Yeah.
And now it might not be always easy to hear, but you'd much rather you want to be able to see that, hey, they're actually standing in that truth and in their authenticity rather than just shutting down.
Yeah.
Well, how many of us betrayed partners say that the lying is the dishonesty, and the lying is the worst part?
Yeah.
It's the hardest part.
Yeah. I think sometimes at the beginning, not to downplay the reality of the betrayal, right? And what comes with that, and envisioning your partner with, especially if it goes beyond what's physical, or the virtual infidelity goes beyond maybe just a screen, but keeps going and escalates. Yeah. Of course, that stuff is very shocking and disturbing and can, participate in some of those flashbacks and other trauma stuff. But I agree. I think especially once you've been in it long enough, you're like, oh, it's the deception that is and the gaslighting and the manipulation.
Gaslighting. Yeah.
Usually all, in a betrayal violence situation, usually for deception, right? Not necessarily to, hurt you on purpose. It's usually the deception thing, right? But all of that's happening has real lived consequences. And like you said, once that starts to shift. One big question I get, and this is kind of a hard question because it's always a tricky one for me to answer, right off the cuff. But Nicole, if you don't mind answering, like so honesty is a tricky thing to monitor, right? Other than I'm just going to check his phone all the time, and then I'm going to ask him if he looked and then check to see, we want these really concrete proof of honesty. But for me, determining honesty actually looked a little bit different than that. So for you, and that's okay if that's part of it, but how did you start to sense that there was safety and there was honesty? Because how do you know? Because they could be lying, right? How do you really know that there's honesty? What tells you?
Gosh, I think that is a
tough question.
That is a really, really tough question. I think that when I was going through my own recovery, and whenever I had this strong sense to look, or strong sense to want to check on things or check history or check his phone, I mean, I would really be checking in with myself and say, what's off? What's off? Is it something in me? Is it something in our relationship? And one thing that I would always say to myself, that isn't my honesty, isn't the thing that I am the one who needs to fix. Like, I'm not the one who needs to prove it, or I'm not the one who needs to so if I had that urge to go and look, that's I'm not supposed to be the investigator.
Yeah, it's that's not my job.
That isn't, yep, that's not my job. And if I feel like I'm safe enough to be able to talk to him about it, they're saying this is where I'm at. I'm sensing that something is off. I'm sensing that we're not in tune, and there's disconnection, and bringing my honest self to the relationship. And so I think I think when it comes to recovery for the betrayal trauma, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, I feel like you're just more the expert there, but the recovery is really learning how to trust yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. It's learning to trust, when to listen to your gut again, and to trust your own self. And now there's going to be times when, your mind can play
wires are crossed.
Yeah. Right. So, so I think it's for me, it was more about me trusting this.
I love that. And I love that part. Sorry, that was hopefully not feeling like a tricky question or I was looking for an answer, but I know you, and I sense from you this principle, and I hope that the people listening sense it as well, which is that I loved how you said, I brought my honest self. And that's something I always invite, those early years of needing to check and look and have accountability software and having that access. I think that's an excellent thing for the betraying partner to offer, have access to my phone, have access to this, accountability software or whatever. That's a very good offering that can be there in some relationships, but and it, especially for safety at the beginning, might really be necessary.
Right.
But I like how you said that, when it came down to it over the course of time, right? And again, we're talking about long stretches of time and growth for all of us in this room and clients we've worked with. You get to that phase where you're like, how do I what do I want in 1 year, 5 year? What relationship do I want? I want to bring my honest self to the table, and my honest self feels triggered about this. I feel like there's something here. Yeah. And I also like that you brought it to him and kind of brought that conversation, because often, and you can tell me about this, Hunter, if you agree with this, often the answer is going to be in how he responds, right? Right. Because you're not going to get, if you have this attuned, willing, accountable, honest person, they're going to go, you're going to have this energy, this regulated energy of ooh, is there something? Let me think about it. Do you want to, let's go on my phone. Let's make sure. You're going to get this really regulated, over time, you'll get this really regulated, safe place to go, okay, maybe it's me. I'm okay. And yes, there are very manipulative people out there, but by and large, most people aren't walking out of like CSI or Law and Order or something, right?
Right.
So
And most of the
readable.
men that I have, I mean, most of the men that I have worked with, and they don't have narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder.
Right.
Most of them, I mean, they have narcissistic
Traits,
tendencies and traits,
yeah.
but they don't, most of the men don't have the personality
Full,
disorder.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a totally different story, right? When they
Right.
do.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a different story.
Right.
So, and that's not my specialty with the full blown personality disorder. But
And
I
most
think
times that's because the full-blown personality disorders, those are people who are not going to be seeking, in general, are not going to be
Right.
seeking support. They're not going to say, oh, I'll go to therapy, or oh, I'll try coaching, or oh, I'll read a book, or I'll do something right. You're just going to get like, you're crazy and
the
fighting, and you're not going to be seeing that anyway.
Mhm.
But I think that oftentimes that trusting yourself is kind of the way to go. So we're
Mhm.
gonna stop for questions in a minute. So if you guys have questions, start typing them. I see a couple that we can go to. But before we do that, Hunter, would you mind telling us, just because some people might be going, oh, okay, this sounds great. I think my partner, my husband is in therapy, or my husband's in coaching, or my husband's reading a book. Maybe they're doing nothing at all, but they might if they knew what was available. I wonder if you share with us what your program offers, how they can get a hold of you if they're
Yeah.
thinking like, oh, this guy knows what he's talking about. He's helped hundreds of people. Like, I want to maybe get a hold of you and learn a little bit more. Share that while I figure out how to find our questions.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
So I can have Nicole post in the live chat my link tree that just has a link to where just all my socials, obviously, but I have a free men's community. So that is like the best place to start, because in that community, one, it is private and it's off of social media. It's on a separate app called School. So they're not going to have to be in a Facebook group. Okay. If your husband or partner has an issue with social media, that's why I did that intentionally. And it's an awesome, awesome app. But there's a
Nice.
free community in there and it's so supportive. So there's no shame. It's a place for men to really become men. Like, that's how I like to put it. It's like, quit porn, become men. Like, that's the feel, the energy in there. But in there's a free starter guide. So the guys can really get familiar with my philosophy and approach. And then, of course, I have clients that work hands-on with me that are paying clients. We're very intensive together. I mean, we spend 6 months together and leave no stone left unturned. Like, it's freedom or nothing. Like, that's my energy, my attitude going in, like you say, it's like that baseball coach kind of energy, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're very much so like, we're going to become men together, but it's very skills oriented. Like, this is my big issue with a sobriety focus is a lot of guys get so hyper focused on not giving in rather than mastering a specific skill set that will empower them to not give in. Right.
Right.
Sobriety is obviously very important. So I don't want it to come off that I don't think it's important.
Yeah.
But my focus with them is like, well, let's make these progressions, these micro progressions, like Nicole was talking about. Like, if we're going to not act out, well, then we have to actually have mastery over our emotions, mastery over urges.
Yep.
So instead of counting days, we're counting how many urges they've successfully processed and managed and chosen not to act out on, to get them in this place of empowerment rather than, they give in and they feel like they're starting over at square one all the time.
Right.
And so when they do give in, how do we learn from it and move on? Let's take the feedback. Let's do it better next time. And we move forward without the shame, with all of that. And then a huge piece of it is obviously creating a new identity. If you believe that you're worthless, if you believe you're never going to make your wife happy, if you believe that you're never going to measure up or amount to anything, then your actions are going to align with that belief. So while they're learning these skills, they have to craft a new identity. Otherwise, it's all kind of for nothing. Like, it's not really going to hit their hearts, even if they're doing the right things, because they don't believe they can change.
Yeah.
So it's kind of these two, like two sides of the coin, the skills, identity, and having that support. All these other men that are so awesome, but of course me there being their cheerleader and coaching them through it, but to not stay in the failure, to get up look up and to move forward and to see that they really actually can change, and that it's a progression and the whole progress over perfection thing. So anyway, that's kind of a little bit of my approach, but I have guys just start with that free community they can join. And then I usually offer like free little 30-minute coaching calls to just genuinely help them. And then if it's a fit to work more hands-on, then we have that conversation. But
right. Well, and the one thing that I just want to say that what I really love about Hunter, because I get to hear his work, is that he's really supportive to the betrayed partners. And he will hold those guys accountable. He won't let them go down a victim narrative. And he will help them to be, he just does such a good job in supporting the betrayed partners through the work that he does with these guys too. And just really helping them to learn, helping them to learn empathy and intimacy and really what do you want in your relationship. And so he does a really good job with that. I think so. But
yeah, I don't tolerate any victim BS
or like partner blaming and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, partner blaming.
And you guys know me, you know that I wouldn't be like supporting Hunter and giving him a voice here, you know, if I thought he would do that. Because that is something that happens out in the world at times. It's therapists who are trying to be chummy or whatever will be not very kind about the betrayed partners. And so that is something that Hunter's organization doesn't tolerate. And
well, and I think because I really struggled so much with this neediness, with the dishonesty, with trying to blame shift, I struggled so much with that. So I just see freaking straight through it with these guys, and I don't tolerate it at all. And we always,
I know what that looks like.
Yes. So I see it so clearly. And I always just go back to one, I just call them out lovingly and very firmly sometimes. But then it's going back to like who are you really wanting to be here? What kind of outcome do you actually want here? Okay, your wife was unhappy with you. She fought with you, but circumstance stays the same. How could you have created a different outcome here? Even if she's mad at you, how can you change your thoughts? How can you change your emotional reaction? How can you change what you chose to react or how you chose to react and respond? And how could you have changed the outcome of this situation and let your wife know that even though she's upset with you, you do love her and that you're standing up as a man and being something more.
A man of integrity.
Getting it back to them. What could they control? There's no room for blaming because there's just, it doesn't get you anywhere.
I think you might want to add to, sorry, I got you off track a little bit, but he also does like 1 or 2 times a month, a free community support group. So if they go into the free group, then he will have live like coaching 1 to 2 times a month.
Yeah. A couple times a month to do a live Zoom call. With the guys.
And
for free.
Yeah. Did you want to add any more about what you do though with
coaching? No, I think that's pretty good.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, we have some good questions. I'm not sure if we'll get to all of them, but we're gonna see what we can do here. So we just have a couple people just thanking you for being here and being honest and talking about healing. I do think sometimes it can be uncomfortable. I've had people, you know, we talk about like success stories and there's almost that like it can feel a little uncomfortable, like maybe I'm rubbing this in your face or like, look, we made it or whatever. But I think it can be so beneficial too when we're all just kind of in that awake space, just learning about betrayal, which is what the Humans Navigating Betrayal group is a group just kind of learning about like, what is this? Is this real? Wait, I'm not crazy. Wait, this is actually a problem. Wait, there's actually a solution to this problem. And so lots of thank yous I'm seeing in the comments here. So here's a question that says, this is kind of going back, I think they asked earlier when we were talking about you, Hunter, when you started to be honest, and maybe you can also speak to the guys that you work with. What do you feel like helps again, this is process but oriented, but like what helps remove the barriers to the dishonesty? I want to like interrupt really quick to just say there's not anything like the betrayed partner does to cause dishonesty, but you know, right, we can all agree on that. But what kinds of things do you think helped you to start to remove that barrier?
That's a really, really good question. And I just, before Hunter answers, because I think that question is for him, that this is our story, so everybody's different, but that dishonesty started when he was young, when he grew up in a very traumatic home. The dishonesty started there because he learned from a very young age, if I tell the truth, I will get in trouble.
I'll get hurt.
And
yeah.
so, but, and also, and so, and with being in a very traumatic environment, he learned to manipulate other people's emotions. He learned
Yeah.
it there, like,
Uh-huh.
right? So he learned, how can I say the right things to get the right response from my parents, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Yep.
so I just wanted to kind of add that, yes, that dishonesty came way before we were married.
Mhm.
And so that was learned at a very young age. And so but I think everyone's situation with that may be a little bit different, but that's his.
I do think
his
that's
story, our
fairly
story.
common. Fairly
Mhm.
common
Yeah.
though. Yeah.
Yeah. So did you want to
Yeah.
what removed the barriers?
Yeah. So lifting the barriers, one was I had to do that trauma work. One, I mean, that's a big piece of it. Like she said, there was tons of emotional abuse as a child, and I had a borderline mother and walking on eggshells all the time, and you just didn't know what you were going to get. And so it was, for me, I was just trying to create safety for myself all the time.
Mhm.
And so then that followed me into my marriage relationship, right? Of if she's upset at me, then it's like nothing's safe.
Yeah.
And I gotta get safe. And well, pornography was the coping mechanism, right?
Yeah.
And so it really, looking at that, understanding that for myself did help me look at it more objectively so that I could start making some progress. Now, I will say that the trauma work did not get rid of the issue. I think it was
habits. Yeah.
yes, I
Yep.
think doing that, if you say your partner has some serious trauma in their past, I think it's very important for them to do trauma work.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, the conditioning is still there. The conditioning to go and look at pornography, the conditioning to lie, to be dishonest, even if you process those traumas, the conditioning still exists and it needs to be addressed directly, right? So for me, it was, I think, maturing as a man, like progressively over time, help like me continuing to kind of further my own vision of like the kind of man I wanted to be, and seeing that this dishonesty wasn't helping me.
Mhm.
Even if I got away with something, I would feel terrible afterwards. Like just coming to total ownership of what impact it was having on me. That helped to lift that. I think, man, just there's no replacement for just doing the work and coming forward, and even when your whole body is screaming against
the
it, to come
opposite,
forward and
yeah.
tell the truth, right? And it was so painful for me at times, like literally, just so you guys can understand how hard this was, it was like my whole body, it's like I had to force myself to speak. I mean, it had such power over me. And so I'm trying to kind of really get to a kind of a concrete answer, because it was not so simple. I think having a lot of support from other men,
Mhm.
having like a 24-hour rule that if I was dishonest, that I would come forward and say, hey, that was a lie. Or
Mhm.
if I viewed pornography, that I would come forward within 24 hours. It was like a good boundary for me, because I knew if I let it go past that
Mhm.
my risk of being dishonest and never saying anything would just escalate exponentially after that. So some boundaries like that were really, really helpful for me.
I think being honest with yourself, like, he started doing a lot of journaling and writing that out, and being honest with your own emotions and your own self. And so I don't know if that's one for you, but I saw you doing that a lot.
Being able to regulate my own emotions, because the honesty was so triggering. Like I would make a mistake and I would just be devastated and then absolutely terrified to tell the truth.
Right.
Absolutely terrified. And so the journaling, using a feelings wheel and journaling all of my emotions, journaling all the sensations in my body, so that I could just be in touch with what was going on, and then some grounding practices to help me get present again.
Can I ask kind of just to interrupt really quick, can I ask kind of a personal question?
Yeah.
On the outside, because you're describing like all of this really vulnerable emotion that is so real.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of us who are therapists and coaches who've worked with men who've been in your shoes, we know that this is what's going on under the surface, right?
Right.
But what did it look like? And probably by the time Nicole could probably see right through it eventually, right? But like
Yeah.
at the beginning, when you're actually terrified and you made a mistake and you're devastated and terrified, what did that actually look like to someone who maybe didn't even know you? I'm guessing it did not look terrified and devastated. Or if it did, it was in a way that like, do you know what I'm saying?
I think it would probably come off as maybe avoidance or just,
Yeah, I was really good at looking fine here
It's like, I'm fine.
while I was
or-
completely a tornado here,
Yeah.
right? That's something I got really skilled at doing.
Yeah. And most people do in your shoes, right?
Yes.
It's that like how to stay safe when we're little and then it moves with you, right? So it's
yeah.
often so I guess I'm speaking to the betrayed partners in this question that you might be like, my husband's not terrified, he's fine. He may not be, but you can't really make him do that work. I don't think there's anything anyone can do to make you get honest.
No.
You can request, and I'm sure Nicole made some pretty serious boundaries and like I did in my marriage and said like in no uncertain terms, this is what's going to have to happen in terms of like that's not okay anymore, but you can't make anybody change.
When I had a really good church leader that helped me navigate through shame. He just helped me stop being in such a shaming environment. And then I was in a men's group that was also very much so not shaming. It was very empowering. I think that's so important for helping a man start being honest, because the honesty is usually shrouded in so much, or the dishonesty, it's being caused by so much fear
and shame.
Most of the time. And so for me, like stepping out of the shame, it helped me be way more resilient. So when this fear, to be honest, would come up, usually the shame is what drove me to just immediately react and not tell the truth. Right. But as I became more resilient to that shame, then I was able to look at it again more objectively and be like, well, why am I freaking out so much? Like I did this. I just got to own it. Yeah, she's probably going to be upset. But that's fine. She's allowed to be upset. Like me being honest is more important. And I have evidence that all the times that I have been honest, she's been upset a lot less than when I wasn't. Right.
Instead of getting caught and in a lie or busted or
But that fear and trauma response would have me say honesty wasn't worth it. It's too dangerous.
Right.
So doing some of that work and having some male mentors to help me start to step out of shame really helped me move forward. And that's something that you can even ask your partner, is not whether or not their group is working for them or anything like that. You can even ask them, like, what's the feel of the group? Like, do you feel like it's helpful for you? Because they might be going to 12-step because it's what they're supposed to do, but they might not actually be getting the yield out of the community that they're in, which is why I have a community, right?
Right.
Not all groups are created equal. And they need to be surrounded by other men that aren't controlled by shame if they're going to have any chance of stepping out of it. They need a man to show them the way through it.
Yeah.
And someone's asking on here, so do you in your program have a resource that helps them get out of shame? Is that like a part of the work that they're doing with you guys?
Oh, yes, absolutely. One of the modules is called Creating a Shame-Free Paradigm. It's actually the first module that they go through. And they need to understand, they go through and very early on in the process, understanding why they feel shame, what got them to the point that they're at right now, and not just around pornography and sexual behaviors, but everything. What are the messages they've received about being a man? What are the messages they've received about women and sexuality, but even money? And I mean, we got to look at it all, right? Because you're a whole human being and it's all connected. So we do the shame work very quickly and talk about the shame cycle and how to break free from it. And then it's very heavy on the skills to kind of put that stick in the tire spokes, right, to stop that cycle.
Awesome. Someone's asking here, and this may end up being more for you, Nicole, with your CSAT experience, but she says, can someone cheat sexually because of porn? And if you remove the porn, does the cheating stop? It's hard to know if cheating is from the from the serial cheating or because of addiction?
Mm. I mean,
I don't know the answer to that definitively.
right. I mean, you know, we've had clients where they started with the pornography and it like, because of the pornography and the ads that kept like coming up over and over. One of our clients specifically that I'm thinking of, the, you know, an ad to actually connect with live people, and it led him to prostitution.
Right.
You know, and so never in his wildest dreams did he think he would go down that path. He was just using pornography. Now, mind you, not a lot of men do not go down that path just because of, they don't cross it. Yeah, because they're viewing pornography, but many do. And many don't, many do. So can pornography be part of that, you know, of that? Yes. And so I'm trying to look at what her question was again.
Can someone cheat sexually because of porn? And if you remove the porn, will cheating stop? So I'll speak to this as well.
Sure.
Is pornography is not the issue, right? It's a symptom of deeper issues. And so cheating is really in the same realm. They're choosing to escape reality. And why? So you got to dig deeper and see that reason why. So removing pornography by itself, it really doesn't matter. It's doing that deeper work is what will stop the cheating.
And I'll speak to that a little bit with my husband, who was able to white knuckle and stop looking at porn, just white knuckle it. But all of the emotional devastation and the objectification and the way he saw human beings was so destructive that it didn't really matter. And I think that's what you're speaking to, that, you know, I mean, it did matter. And I was like, okay, good. You're not doing that anymore. Phew. But all of those problems were still devastating the relationship, causing betrayal trauma in me. There's still deception. There were still all of the habits that were going on. He wasn't like emotionally a healthy human being. And so kind of, I think what you're saying, Hunter, is like that spectrum from looking at porn every once in a while to the degree that a doctor's like, it's not a big deal, all the way to like having serial affairs that they don't have an emotional connection to. It's not like a one-time affair event. It's that those serial affairs, they're all a part of the same spectrum around a really poor coping mechanisms. And that sounds like, that's like the biggest euphemism in the world for a betrayed partner, like poor coping mechanisms. Like, how dare you? Like, you're destroying me. This is like bombs going off, but really it is just really, really poor coping mechanisms. And so what you're saying is like, there's got to be trauma work that goes along with a therapist, right? And then those skills and that can come from coaching can be really effective and efficient. We can go to therapy and get skills, but often that it can be really watered down. It'd be hard to do that. I think you'd agree, Nicole. Like sometimes the skills, you're not going to get it in such an effective, efficient way as you can in coaching. The same for betrayed partners. Right. Getting coaching will get you those skill sets and that education so much faster and streamlined that you're going to do, 12 weeks and go like, whoa, like I feel different.
And that's why we don't focus on sobriety. Because, you know, because I mean, like he said before, sobriety is important, but if someone is just sober, that doesn't mean that they're actually doing the work or recovering. Right. Like they're in the recovery work. You know, it's like someone who says that they didn't drink for a year, but they didn't go and do anything. They're not thinking differently about themselves. They don't have a higher vision of themselves. They haven't done that trauma work. They're not learning the coping skills. They're not learning how to handle the stressors of life. They're not doing that self-love, self-care, right? Then, you know, I mean, I don't know if this is like a term, but that is okay to use, but like you call that a dry drunk. They still think like an alcoholic. They still act like one. But they're just not drinking, right? And so that's why we don't focus entirely on the sobriety date. It's more of actually we're focusing on how much are you using the skills and practicing the skills and counting the skills and the urges, or like how many urges are you processing? How much of like when you have a stressful situation, like what did you do in that stressful situation? What coping tools did you use? You know, and so that's why we don't focus so much on the sobriety piece. Like we said, it is important.
It's a natural outcome of doing real like meaningful work, right? And but to speak back to comment there or question, you know, the viewing pornography, if somebody's not doing that deeper work, it can absolutely escalate those urges. So yes, removing the porn could potentially stop them from serial cheating if it's part of their ritual.
Right.
Okay. But again, it's just an escalated behavior of the same root cause issues. So in this situation, I would help them stop viewing pornography by helping them master those urges. And in doing so, if the urge to cheat does come up, they will then also be armed with the same skills that will help them manage that urge.
Right.
And not act on it.
Right. Yeah. And I'll just say one last piece too, is that like earlier on in our recovery, I think there was a piece that was missing for us because we did focus so much on sobriety, or at least even I did. I focused on, are you not looking? Are you not looking? Are you not looking? And, what was missing for us was really learning about what is healthy sexuality. What does that look like? You know, because instead of it just being absent, what is healthy intimacy? What is, and really integrating that and learning about that. So that was the piece that was missing for us earlier on in our recovery. And I don't think that we got a lot of help around that for many people, because so many people are just focused on sometimes even the trauma and the trauma work, which is not bad, of course, but the trauma and the sobriety. But then what's the vision when you're not looking at pornography? What's in place of that?
Right.
That
when we're looking forward, like what's the life going to look like? I really appreciate that. So we have so many really great questions and we're just already quite out of time. So what we're going to do, Nicole, because she's a betrayed partner, she's able and allowed to be in our group. So she may have some time to check in and answer some of these questions. I will see if I can answer some of these questions that we haven't been able to get to today. I know that Nicole dropped the link to the free group that Hunter offers for maybe some of your partners who might be interested. And thank you guys so much for participating in the comments. And Nicole and Hunter, we'll wrap up here and give you back your evening, but we're so grateful to have you here tonight, sharing your story, sharing your experience, and then what you're now helping other individuals with, because you've seen the success in your own life and in the lives of many people as a therapist and as a coach. I've seen it as well. And I know that sometimes it can feel very hopeless. It can feel impossible. And depending on the environment that you live in and the people that you're communicated with, because we're touching people all over the whole world right now. We're talking to people in this group from every demographic, every race, religion, creed, gender identity across the whole board. And, you know, it may feel impossible. You may have never met a safe person before. You may have never experienced safety in your own life. And this can feel very far away or even like fake. Like this isn't real. People don't live this way. And so I want to send my love to you if that's kind of where you're coming from today. And I also want to share that having hope can be really scary when you've lived in a lot of hopelessness and in a lot of hurt. It can actually feel even threatening. And so that's okay. It's okay if this wasn't for you today. You can put it away. And if you're ready for a little hope and you're ready for a little bit of like vision and what could my life look like? Maybe it's not going to be with your current partner. Maybe you're really getting to your intuitive self and you can regulate and get, you know, you're in your inner survivor, but you get into that inner sage and you're like, I just don't think my partner is ever going to have enough self-awareness in this lifetime to be the type of person I would like to be with. And that's really hard to sit with. And you don't have to react to that or do anything with that, but that might be your reality. You might think, oh, maybe we could, maybe I could make some invitations or set some boundaries in my current relationship. And maybe this is some vision. And I know Nicole and Hunter, you guys are probably like, we have so much work to do. Like we haven't made it. And all of the friends that I have, and I have quite a few friends, couples that are doing well years after betrayal. And we all say the same thing, like, man, you know, we still have so much growth to do, but
we do.
It's beautiful to be able to share the parts of the success that you do have. And that can provide a little bit of hope and a little bit of a picture of what that can look like. So thank you guys so much for coming on and sharing your story. And we, you know, I'm sure we'll keep we'll keep communicating and keep
Yeah.
connecting. And if you guys have
Yep.
more questions, you can always reach out to me, and I can email them to Hunter, and we can
Yeah.
get you guys connected that
Mhm.
way, or you can go to his link as well. So
Well, and
thank you.
I'll just want to say
ahead.
thank you so much
Please.
for having us. And I really appreciate being here. And if there was anything I said that was hurtful, it was not my intention. And this isn't such a short period of time that I wish I could maybe even give more context or explain to myself. Like I said, it's been like 12 years of our journey to try to smash into an hour. But the thing
Absolutely.
that, and I really just what you said at the end is like, I've been in that place where I have felt completely hopeless and powerless. And so I know what that's like, but I guess my message is that, that there is hope and there is healing, and that there is so many resources out there like you and like that we've had that are like even 15 years ago that we never even had. And so I just think that, don't give up. The resources that are going to fit you are out there. And so don't give up on yourself, that you deserve
Yep.
healing, you deserve peace, and there is hope. And so that's what I want to leave with tonight. So, but thank you for having us. So
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kaylee.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We're so grateful for your time and your energy, and we will see you later.
all right,
Bye, guys.
bye.
Later, everybody.